Welcome to Politics for Patriots. Here's your host, the eviscerator of progressive nonsense, the executioner of imbecility, and the grim reaper of BS, Eddie Zipper.
Welcome to episode 58 of the Politics for Patriots podcast. If you have not done so yet, please subscribe on iTunes, leave a review on iTunes, tell all your friends to listen. Check out older episodes on my website, eddiezipperer.com. That's EDDIEZIPPERER.com. Over the last couple of days, the mainstream media have served up a perfect example of how fake news works. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through the fake news process and show you how the media is not the least. They are not the least bit interested in reporting news events or analyzing news events in the case of opinion writers. They are only interested in one thing. They are only interested in shaping events. All the time on this show, I talk about Donald Trump and how the fake news media goes after him. Often, those who support President Trump can see it clearly and it's obvious, while those who do not support President Trump can't see it at all. And that's just the way it is. You can't make them see it. They don't want to see it. So today, I'm going to do something just a little bit special. I am going to diagram a fake news media attack on someone else. Someone I disagree with on a regular basis. Someone I would not vote for to be assistant to the dog catcher. Okay, I would not vote for this person to hold any elected office. This is a person I only have criticism for on a regular basis. Elizabeth Warren, or as I have often referred to her on this show as sitting bullshit. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm simply doing it just to illustrate how the fake news media works, because Elizabeth Warren is now the victim of a fake news media attack. Okay, this is what President Trump is talking about when he says the words fake news. Trump has gotten destroyed over and over for saying fake news media is the enemy of the people. But let me ask you this. If the news media decides that they want to shape events instead of reporting on events, if they want to use propaganda to decide elections and shape public opinion, they're not exactly the ally of the people, are they?
Well, this reporter was possibly a little hasty earlier. Would like to reaffirm his allegiance to this country and its human president.
That about sums up the 2018 mainstream news media right there in one clip. Okay, so the presidential election season is coming to devour us all. It is like the blob. Eventually, it sucks us all in. And the fake news media is leaving behind a trail of slime as they slug forward into the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. Lots of people have said they think 15 or 20 Democrats will run. Right? This time, when there were a bunch of Republicans, they all called it the clown car. You remember that? Now it's going to be, they say it's going to be 15 to 20 Democrats. I haven't seen the words clown car anywhere in the media. I guess that's not what it's called anymore. Now it's just called a large field. But when it was all the Republicans, it was called a clown car. But I think we all know the reason for that. Anyway, lots of people have said 15 to 20 candidates in the Democratic primary. I have said on this show, I will believe that when I see it. Because the Democrats in the mainstream media really love to pick the winners and losers. They don't want to have real elections. They want to just choose. I'll wager by the time the actual primaries come around, they will have knocked out anyone that they don't want winning the nomination before a single vote has been cast. That's simply how they roll. That is simply their objective, is to decide the election before the votes are cast. I mean, there was no more obvious example than the election of 2016 when they tried so hard to decide the election for Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump won anyway. But that's what they do. So, if you follow the news at all, chances are over the last couple days you've read or seen coverage of Elizabeth Warren's 2020 chances of being president. Right? These segments are all over the place. The opinion pieces are all over the place. The news stories are all over the place. And you can't see it, but when I said news stories, I did finger quotes around news. Because not really news. We'll talk about that in a second. So what have you likely heard about Elizabeth Warren's 2020 chances of being president? You have probably heard that they aren't good. That she has committed political suicide with her whole DNA test debacle. It's the big, huge narrative right now. It's everywhere. Right? All the liberals are saying it, and all the conservatives are just eating popcorn watching them say it like, yeah, nice. I think just about every news outlet in existence has run a story, whether it's an opinion or a news piece, on this issue over the past couple days. Which is weird because there's no lead. She didn't make a big newsworthy speech. She didn't release any new information. See, news stories and opinion pieces have what is called a lead. L-E-D-E. Which is basically a news event that justifies the existence of a story. A strong lead is a story everyone knows about and is timely right at that moment. Something like, yesterday, Jim Comey held a press conference to announce that the investigation against Hillary Clinton has been closed with no charges. That's a big lead. Right? You can go a million places after you write that sentence, and everyone is interested wherever you go because of the magnitude and crazy timeliness of the lead. A terrible lead is, and they're everywhere. Believe me, there are many more terrible leads than there are substantive, good, interesting leads. A terrible lead would be something like, conservatives on Twitter expressed anger about, and then whatever stupid thing happened, right? Those Republicans pounce stories. That's always the headline. Republicans pounce on whatever stupid thing happened. The stories always claim Twitter is enraged. Then they cite like 4 random Twitter users. Okay, that's an example of a terrible lead. And there needs to be precisely 0 stories written about that news. And you could probably hear the finger quotes. News. Lots of opinion writers actually write the lead last. They say, okay, I wrote the opinion I felt like writing. Now I'm going to connect it to some timely news story. And that's just a way to do it, because then you can write any opinion you want. But you have to connect it to a news story or nobody's going to publish it because it has to be timely. Okay, so here's what happened. Here's the huge fake news attack on Elizabeth Warren that just happened. And here's how it started, and I'm going to walk you through the whole attack. 2 days ago, the New York Times dropped a totally random hit piece on Elizabeth Warren. It is called Elizabeth Warren Stands by DNA Test, but around her worries abound. And then here's from the story. The plan was straightforward. After years of being challenged by President Trump and others about a decades-old claim of Native American ancestry, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts would take a DNA test to prove her stated family origins in the Cherokee and Delaware tribes. But nearly 2 months after Ms. Warren released the test results, and drew hostile reactions from prominent tribal leaders, the lingering cloud over her likely presidential campaign has only darkened. Conservatives have continued to ridicule her. More worrisome to supporters of Miss Warren's presidential ambitions, she has yet to allay criticism from grassroots progressive groups, liberal political operatives, and other potential 2020 allies who complain that she put too much emphasis on the controversial field of racial science, and in doing so, played into Mr. Trump's hands. The lead on this is 2 months old. This story is not timely. And trust me, timeliness is almost all that matters in the news business. I've written opinion pieces for news outlets where the editor accepted it and said, "Oh, great piece, we're going to run it on Thursday." Then Thursday rolls around and the editor writes me an email explaining that they're not running it after all because something happened on Wednesday and now nobody cares about Monday anymore. Timeliness is king in this business, which, by the way, is why I did an episode on Elizabeth Warren's DNA test 2 months ago when it was a story and it was timely. The lead on the New York Times story is 2 months old. It was timely 2 months ago, but they weren't out to get Elizabeth Warren 2 months ago, were they? No, they were busy trying to generate a blue wave in the midterms, and that was all they cared about 2 months ago. Now, the midterms are over, and they want to destroy Elizabeth Warren. Why? Why would the liberal New York Times want to destroy liberal Elizabeth Warren? It doesn't make sense. They should be allies. Well, the reason they want to destroy her is because she stands a very good chance of winning the Democratic primaries. On the political spectrum, she's Bernie Sanders light. Ideologically, she falls somewhere between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And that is going to be the sweet spot in this Democratic primary. Right? Somebody who can get those Bernie supporters on board without going full Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and, being a crazy person who puts off the whole country, which is what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. She's basically the Mike Tyson of politics. Everything she says is hilarious, and it will continue to be hilarious until she ends up biting off someone's ear. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I don't feel bad mocking her a little bit because she doesn't seem to know anything that you might learn in a 9th grade civics class. Branches of government, what's that? How many houses of Congress? I don't know. So basically, she sits on Twitter and she says things that make no sense. And so everything she says about politics basically sounds like this.
My style is impetuous, my defense is impregnable, and I'm just ferocious. I want your heart, I want to eat his children.
Absolute gibberish. I need a sound effect to play when I've strayed too far from the point. Now I've strayed too far from the point. I'm going to go back. Okay, so, point was Elizabeth Warren stands a very good chance of winning the Democratic primary because of where she falls on the spectrum ideologically. Somewhere between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Like I said, that's going to be the sweet spot. Get all those Bernie people on board. Get them excited with a little bit of socialism. But at the same time, you're not full-on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So Elizabeth Warren, essentially, she's like the Bernie Sanders for Generation Xers and above who have terrible economic ideas, but they aren't quite ready to throw on a Che Guevara t-shirt. That sounds like prime ideological real estate for a Democrat. So why doesn't the New York Times want her to win? They don't want her to win because President Trump calls her Pocahontas, and that scares the hell out of them. Now I know what you're thinking. Come on, Eddie. nobody really cares that much when he calls her Pocahontas. I mean, everybody's heard it. It's an old joke. Yeah. Listen to this. Let me explain why it scares the hell out of them. Because every time President Trump says Pocahontas, the same thing happens in every American brain. An unconscious process that the brain carries out in a single microsecond. Okay, but I'm going to explain. Here it is in slow motion. Trump says Pocahontas.
Pocahontas?
When he says it, brain synapses begin firing. And the brain says to itself, why did he call her Pocahontas? Oh yeah, because she lied about being Native American to get that job at Harvard. Trump says Pocahontas. Everyone in America thinks about the lie. Right? Just like Trump says Crooked Hillary, everyone in America thinks about the FBI investigation into her email server. That's what branding is all about. It's about creating that microsecond process in someone's brain. One of your friends says, hey, let's go get a drink. And those synapses start firing. And your brain says, friends, refreshing drink, Bud Light. At least that's what you think if the marketing team at Bud Light has done their job and programmed your brain to tell you that. Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren's lie. Every single time. See, it began at rallies with big, long stories about Elizabeth Warren's lie and about taking a DNA. That's how it started. And he said it, and they covered it, and it was all over the TV. Oh, look at all these racist things that President Trump is saying about Elizabeth Warren, even though it's not racist at all, of course. But you know how the news media is. But they play it, and everybody hears it a billion times, and now he doesn't have to tell the whole story anymore. He just has to say,
Pocahontas?
That's why the New York Times wants her gone. They don't want anybody who is already a victim of Trump's political branding technique. So what do we get? We get a hit piece. There's no lead. It's not news. There's no news anywhere in this piece. It was news 2 months ago. Now it's olds, which is the opposite of news. But the New York Times piece is just the very beginning of the fake news process. It's what happens next. That is even more interesting and even more fake newsy. I say it all the time. Somebody creates an argument that the McPundits like, and they can't echo it fast enough, right? You tell them an opinion, and then they echo it. That's what Ben Rhodes told us. That's how they got the Iran deal approved. That's how they created support, by using the media as an echo chamber, which is what it is. That's not something I made up. The guy who did it bragged about doing it. He told everybody what he did. He wanted the credit. He wanted everybody to know how smart he was. But he's not smart. The media is stupid, which made him look smart or feel smart. So the New York Times says something, the pundits repeat it. Somebody creates an argument that the McPundits like. They echo it. This week, the New York Times says Elizabeth Warren is finished, and all the McPundits go, oh!
Yep.
90% of these people aren't smart. They don't have any real opinions. They just repeat what becomes talking points. They're part of an echo chamber. So here's the next step. The New York Times piece came out on December 6th. Since then, there has been hundreds of stories about Elizabeth Warren in hundreds of news outlets. Let's start with two. One from the Washington Examiner and one from Chris Cillizza, the CNN McPundit. I call him the McPundit because he serves up takes that aren't always fresh, they aren't always delicious, they aren't always quality, but they're always hot and they're always fast. All right, so we're going to start with these two pieces, the CNN and the Washington Examiner. The lead on both of these pieces is what news event? Right? The New York Times didn't even have a news event as a lead. They just randomly dropped a hit piece. So what news lead could possibly be the progenitor of two more pieces about Elizabeth Warren? The New York Times report is the lead. See, it's not a news story at all. It's a news event. Headline after headline. New York Times blasts Elizabeth Warren. New York Times scalps Warren. Warren-Campaign-Teepee toppled by Times. And they're all pretty much the exact same story. All right, here's from the Washington Examiner. Senator Elizabeth Warren is facing mounting hurdles as she considers a potential 2020 presidential bid. The Massachusetts Democrats' political fortunes are still reeling from her release 2 months ago of DNA test results aimed at a pre-2020 preemptive strike against President Trump and others that have raised doubts about her claims of Native American heritage. So what's new? What is news here? It's not the DNA test, because that was 2 months ago. No, the news here, the lead is still reeling, facing mounting hurdles. That's not news. That's just a technique that they used to make old news sound current. Oh yeah, the fallout is still happening. This is super current. All right, here's the CNN one from McPundit Saliza. When Elizabeth Warren unveiled a 5-minute video aimed at putting to rest questions as to whether she actually was Native American in mid-October, it was, not well received. He's got like this snarky tone that he used. It was, not well received. It turns out that the damage done to Warren's political prospects in 2020 was significant. It turned out that way? How did it turn out that way? Oh, well, there was this piece in the New York Times. And that's why. Okay, over to the Washington Post. The lead on their story is Mindy Myers, who was one of the primary architects of Warren's political rise and has remained one of her close advisors, had been expected to play a senior role in the senator's campaign, but she has been in talk with several rival campaigns and is planning to meet soon with Beto O'Rourke, who is considering a presidential run. So that's a messy lead, but much better than using the New York Times story as a lead. But the story is just the same exact story wherever you read it, no matter what the lead is. So here's the Washington Post. Here's what they have in their story. But she also stumbled notably in October when she attempted to put to rest a controversy over her claim to Native American ancestors by releasing DNA results, a move that enraged tribal groups and other minorities concerned about her reliance on a test to measure ethnicity. That episode injected uncertainty over the decision-making by Warren and her campaign staff and subjected her to both anger and mockery just as she was gearing up for a potential presidential effort. And not only is it the same story you read everywhere else, it exists for the same reason as all the other ones, because the New York Times fired at Warren and the war is on. Opinion piece in the Boston Herald. The very, very weak lead on this one is that Warren is now reportedly considering an apology to Native Americans, though the writer cites absolutely zero sources of these reports. He just says it like it's an established truth. Oh yeah, she's considering an apology to Native Americans. Well, according to who? Because if you don't say according to someone, then it's just according to you. But nobody cares at this point because the Elizabeth Warren is bad motif has been established. So we don't really need to have all kinds of facts. We don't need... You could just be sloppy now. By this point, everyone understands that you don't need a lead anymore because we're all just piling on Elizabeth Warren and we're pretending this thing from 2 months ago is a brand new thing. That's the lead in all of them. All right, so here's the content. Elizabeth Warren's presidential dreams are imploding, and it may be too late to undo the damage. The Massachusetts senator flunked her DNA test and now is reportedly considering an apology to Native Americans, but it won't work. It's the same story. Boston Globe editorial. The lead on this one, this is my favorite one. The lead on this one is Deval Patrick, whoever the hell that is, in the rest of the country other than Massachusetts. We don't know. Whoever that is, he's dropping out of the 2020 race. Nice. Your lead has local relevance. That's very good. But there is one problem with your lead. And that's that this isn't an editorial about Deval Patrick, because let's be real, who's going to read that? The answer is nobody. Nobody is going to read that. Maybe Deval Patrick will read it. Maybe he'll send it to some of his friends and they'll read it. That's about it. But no, this editorial is not about Deval Patrick at all. It's about Elizabeth Warren. It's a bait and switch lead. Extra, extra, big story on Deval Patrick. Oh, really? What's the big story on Deval Patrick? Elizabeth Warren is awful. That's the story on Deval Patrick? Yup. It's true. Here's what the story with the Deval Patrick lead pivoted to. The writer was like Ross on trying to take the couch up the stairs on that episode of Friends. Pivot! That's what the writer did. They did a great big pivot. This is the story about Deval Patrick. I'm going to read you a little slice of it. Warren... And of course it starts with Warren because it's a story about Deval Patrick. Warren missed her moment in 2016, and there's reason to be skeptical of her prospective candidacy in 2020. While Warren won re-election, her margin of victory in November suggests there's a ceiling on her popularity. Baker garnered more votes than she did in a state that is supposed to be a Democratic haven. Meanwhile, a September poll indicated that Massachusetts voters were more enthusiastic about Patrick making a White House bid than Warren. So you heard his name in there. Yeah, it's a story about him. Okay, I'm going back to quoting. Those are warning signs from the voters who know her best. While Warren is an effective and impactful senator with an important voice nationally, she has become a divisive figure. A unifying voice is what the country needs now after the polarizing politics of Donald Trump. So, yeah, that's the Boston Globe's editorial about Deval Patrick. And obviously it's an editorial about Deval Patrick the same way that Batman movies are about Alfred. If you don't know who Alfred is, good. That was pretty much my point. So then, Rolling Stone has their own Rest in Peace Elizabeth Warren article. And guess what the lead for that one is? The Boston Globe editorial. That's their lead. It says, whether or not Warren runs in 2020 is of little concern today. Wait, what? Every news outlet in America has a brand new story about that. It's the most important story in the entire world. And yet Rolling Stone is accidentally 100% correct. That it actually is of little concern. It is not salient in the least. But here we are because the New York Times had a new report. All right, so here's what's in the Rolling Stone. Are you running for president is the most useless question to ask a politician. You rarely get an answer worth anything, and it wastes time that could be spent getting to the heart of more important matters. I think the question of why Warren decided to seek a DNA test to verify her Native American heritage is more pressing than whether or not she runs. You do? Well, then here's a suggestion. Write your opinion piece 2 months ago when the DNA test happened. I'm not just whistling Dixie. Okay, on October 17th, I released an episode of Politics for Patriots. You can find it on my website if you're interested, eddiezipperer.com. Guess what the episode was titled? It was titled, That Was Fast. Warren's 2020 presidential campaign is already a disaster, which was clear when she did the whole DNA thing. Everybody everywhere knew it back then. So as you can see, I actually agree with the substance of this giant fake news media echo chamber hit on Elizabeth Warren. But where was it 2 months ago? It was set aside because they didn't want to go after a Democrat until the midterms were over. So you see how circular all this news coverage is. One outlet starts it, and then the rest just repeat each other. They just use each other's stories as the lead.
It's circular. It's like a carousel. You pay the quarter, you get on the horse. It goes up and down and around. Circular, circle, with the music, the flow. All good things.
In short, here is what just happened to Elizabeth Warren. She got fake newsed. The New York Times published an opinion piece disguised as a new report. It wasn't timely and it had no lead. They told all the McPundits and the other mainstream media outlets what they should think. Then they told all the news readers around the country what they should think. And that will end up sinking Elizabeth Warren because nobody on the left is willing to shout the words fake news, which is what this obviously was. It was a coordinated attempt to get Elizabeth Warren out of the race because they think she'll lose because President Trump calls her Pocahontas. Whew. And this will end up sinking her because, like I said, nobody on the left will call it out. And nobody will listen to me calling it out. But that's what it is. And this is the same giant fake news media apparatus that goes after President Trump every single day. All right, that's it for the show today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe on iTunes. Please leave a review on iTunes. Visit the website. You can email me at patriots@eddieZipper.com. And that's it for today. I'm out of here.
She of the great tribal heritage. What tribe is it? Let me think about that one. Meantime, she's based her life on being a minority. Pocahontas. They always want me to apologize for saying it. And I hereby, oh no, I want to apologize. I'll use tonight. Pocahontas, I apologize to you. I apologize. To you, I apologize. To the fake Pocahontas, I won't apologize.
You just listened to Politics for Patriots with Eddie Zipper. Email the show at patriots@eddiezipper.com. And please subscribe.